Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Project Management Tools, Driving Digital Transformation with Your Teams. My name is Jordan Future Burmeister. I'm the Marketing Manager at Elire, and I'll be moderating today's webcast. A couple of quick reminders before we get started. All attendees are going to be on mute for the presentation. However, we do have both the Q&A and the chat function available that we'll be keeping an eye on. So if you do have any questions, feel free to submit them throughout the presentation, and we'll make sure to leave about 5 minutes at the end for a live Q&A. We do have a poll question towards the end of our presentation, so please make sure to respond. Helps us cater content for future webinars. Today's session is also going to be recorded, and the copy of today's presentation will be available on elire.com on our blog, as well as on our Elire Inc. YouTube page, and all of those social tags will be at the end of this presentation as well. With that, I will go ahead and pass it over to Richard for today's presentation.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you very much. I sure do appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for joining this session. We're excited to share this content with you. Just quick in terms of introductions for myself. My name is Richard Merrill. I'm a partner with Elire. And I have now almost 25 years experience in terms of project management, leading strategy projects, process improvement projects, technology implementations, and hoping to share some of my sort of best practices that I've come up with and the team has come up with over the years with all of you. But first, we'll tell you a little bit about Elire, and then we'll talk about breaking free of nonstop meetings, because some of the agenda items like leveraging project management software and a PM toolkit or leveraging collaboration tools and techniques are not always possible if you're always in nonstop meetings. So we do want to talk about how to get out of some of those meetings, what meetings are required and not required, so that you can free up time to then take advantage of some of the practical tools and tips for PM software, collaboration tools. And then we'll end it with some complementary resources we want to make available to all of you attending the webinar today. But as I mentioned, first, a little about Elire. We are now in business now over 16 years, and we partner with our clients to implement, integrate, upgrade all of their software investments, primarily in the accounting and HR spaces. And we really want to not just implement, but provide guidance on how they can really leverage that software to improve their business processes and unlock the potential of that whole investment. And we do that, we hope, by a deep commitment to excellence and really being a trusted advisor, making the recommendations that make sense for the client based upon what we know from our years of implementation experience, primarily within the Oracle space, but now expanding ever more beyond that. So let's talk first about breaking free of nonstop meetings. So, if you are in back-to-back meetings all day, with almost no heads down time to get your work done, then that's an issue. And I know I talk to a lot of folks across the country and globally, and this is a concern. It's a particular concern in America. It's not as big a concern in some other places. And we're talking in this webinar about project management work, right? And so how do you actually do the work of the project if you're only meeting about it? And if this is true for you, is it also true of your team members on the project? So what can we do to sort of get out of some of these meetings to free up time to actually get some of the work done? But first, some meetings are required. If you've attended some of our other project management webinars, you would know that we do believe in a well-defined meeting cadence. We believe in kickoff meetings at the start of the project and the start of each phase to make sure people know their roles and responsibilities and the timeline and the methodology. We're also big believers in weekly status meetings to talk about risks and issues and make sure everyone is operating in lockstep. And then, of course, steering committee meetings to make sure people are in line with the sponsors and the stakeholders, and that we're giving guidance to resolve or getting guidance to resolve key issues. And then some project management methodologies, such as Agile, I myself am a Scrum Master, have very defined meeting cadences as well. So we know that some meetings are required, but we also know there's a lot of other meetings going on. So beyond these required meetings, we really encourage our own consultants and our clients to think of meetings more as a last resort. And think about, what are you trying to accomplish? And if it's a one-way message outside of a webinar or training, then maybe an email is the better tool. If your goal is to get everyone in a room together and just talk to them for an hour, is that really the best use of everyone's time? Or could that one-way message be delivered through another channel? Also, Q&A, if we only have a few questions that need to be resolved, how many of us have been invited to a meeting where, oh, I think we only need 10 or 15 minutes, but I'm going to block you for an hour. And if we don't need it, we'll give it back. And then after those first few questions are answered, then it just keeps going and going. But so if you only have a few quick questions, maybe leverage group chat. And we'll talk about some of the chat features we use. Also, editing documents. We've all been in meetings where we've watched one person edit an Excel document or a PowerPoint document or a Word document, and everyone's just sitting there watching that person edit. We really think a better way to do that is putting the document on OneDrive and leveraging, or Google Docs, right? And leveraging some of these shared tools that lets multiple people edit the document at the same time. It's a great way to get out of the meeting, right? But it's also a great way to increase ownership and make sure more people have their hands on the document. But sometimes meetings are required. So if it's going to be a series of facilitated exercises where you're pulling people through the creation of a process map or a series of brainstorms, and there's true back and forth and lots of people participating, then that's a great use of a meeting. Or if it's a design session where you're doing a demo and maybe you're reviewing a document as well, and maybe you're answering questions and you're doing a lot of this back and forth, then that's also a great way to use a meeting. Make sure you have alignment and participation. So beyond sort of trying to get some of those unnecessary meetings off the calendar and into a more appropriate channel, there are some other techniques to eliminate meetings. Or at least make sure you have time to get your project work done. And some of that might be as simple as blocking off time on your calendar. We mentioned blocking off time for lunch, but you could also, right below that, we mentioned, blocking off productive time. If I'm really productive between 8 and 9:30 and I get more done in that 90 minutes than I do all day, then maybe I should get that blocked off, right? And then we know this next one makes people nervous, but share your calendar so people can see what meetings you're in and the titles of those meetings. Because we find that if people see the titles of the meetings, they're less likely to overbook. However, not every organization is comfortable with that. There's some privacy issues. You don't necessarily want everyone seeing the titles of your meetings. So in that case, you create a policy where if you see a block, you may not know what it is, but you see it blocked out on Outlook or wherever, then don't overbook it, right? You can also shorten meetings. Many of these tools like Outlook, like Google Calendar, all have defaults. So when you create a meeting, it defaults to 60 minutes. You can change that default so it's only 45 or 50 minutes or 30 minutes. And then the last thing is, reducing or eliminating meetings by making sure you have the right people in the meeting. The last thing you want to do is have a meeting and then end it with so-and-so wasn't here, so now we have to meet again. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes, but there is a tool we use around stakeholder identification called a RACI to identify who's responsible, accountable, consultant, and informed to make sure you have the right people in the room. And when you do have a meeting, we recommend a tool called a Grippy to really keep that meeting focused. And a Grippy is an agenda tool that really makes sure your meeting is organized and it's focused. And it really helps to make sure that you're getting everything accomplished and you're getting rid of meetings where nothing actually occurs except people talking. And it stands for goals, roles, process, and interpersonal agreements. And, goals is making sure everyone knows the meeting objectives and what we're trying to accomplish. And the role is, why am I there? Am I presenting? Am I a SME? Am I a note taker? Am I giving my opinion? And then how are we going to accomplish it? Are we going to do this facilitated exercise first, and then do this, and then do that? What's the order in which we're going? And then what are some interpersonal agreements? One interpersonal agreement we often use is, if someone's making a comment or starting a conversation that is not helping you accomplish the goal, then you can offline it. Jot it in what we call a parking lot, call a timeout, and then get back, to the real goal of the meeting. And this agenda tool, this grippy tool, can be attached to your meeting invites and reviewed at the beginning of the meeting. So now that we hopefully have given some practical advice about getting out of some of these meetings, let's talk about project management software and project management toolkits. Hopefully you'll now have a little more time, to focus on some of these things. So project and portfolio management software is abundant. Everybody has a list of their leading solution. I've put the Gartner Magic Quadrant here on the side, so you can see Gartner's point of view and of what are the leading solutions. And we at Elire are big believers in this software. But we also realize that not everyone on this call, not every organization we work with has access to it, because it does require significant investment. It has licensing costs, it has training requirements. There's a lot of administrative overhead and data entry. And some of that overhead may mean having a PMO or someone to create standards. So if you have access to one of these tools, we really recommend you use it for your own project. However, if you don't have access to one of these tools and you're just running a one-off project and want to take advantage of some technology to help you, then we really recommend a pretty affordable and flexible alternative that some of you may know, which is called Smartsheet. And Smartsheet is in this PPM space, but if you're just running a one-off project and you don't have access to the larger tool, this is a great way to get access to a tool that's going to give spreadsheet, workflow, automation, attachment, and dashboard capability. It's also going to give you a lot of shared views and record keeping and, of detailed history and activity logs. You can set up automated alerts and reminders and have really cool dashboards, all at a pretty reasonable price. Again, speaking to all you who may not have access to one of the other PPM tools, everyone can pretty much come up with this budget in their project and leverage this type of tool. And the cool thing about it is it's really flexible in that it integrates with Google, Microsoft apps, Jira, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Slack. And because it's fairly extensible through REST APIs and webhooks, it kind of integrates to everything you need it to integrate to. And so some of you may be familiar with the tool, some of you may not. So let's just sort of take a look at it. This is Smartsheet, and this is a dashboard view that we'll talk about in a minute. But underneath that, you can build out a fairly detailed project plan. And for this project, this project plan is hundreds of lines long. All of you experienced PMs are going to recognize, various functionality, like having your task, who is it assigned to, what's the start date, the end date, the percent complete. If friends of Microsoft Project will recognize all of these predecessor codes. So it lets you build all of that functionality out in a fairly detailed way. And then it also lets you have other detailed underneath those dashboards, such as, I mentioned a RAID log, which stands for, risks, action items, issues, and decisions. And we actually put our parking lots in here as well. So you can track all of that, who's it's assigned to, what's the due date. That's sort of that more common spreadsheet kind of capability. But what's nice is that then flows into a very visual dashboard. This is an upgrade project where we can see our overall percent complete. We can see how we're doing by number of tasks. And this particular project, where we're at right now, we're trying to do some fit gapping, we're doing some current state analysis, we're doing some business process analysis, we're defining scope. You can see in a very visual way that's going to be appealing to a steering committee where you're at. And then also layer in, views of the project plan, layer in views of risks, and then layer in a lot of other status dashboards on various milestones. And then, of course, going back to that project plan view, what's nice is all of these tasks, you can have attachments to the various line items. You can also kick off workflow. So it's sending reminders to people, letting them know that their task is coming due. Or you can add a comment and say, hey, where are you at on this task? And all of that is living, within the tool at a very reasonable price. So again, Smartsheet's a great alternative to project managers as a PPM software. If you don't have access to one of those larger or more robust platforms, it itself is very robust, as I think you just saw, and it's pretty. It's got a very low licensing cost, and it's also really easy to learn. They have a great series of training videos that you can watch, and in the course of a day or two, you can learn how to set up everything we just looked at. So again, if you're a project manager on this call and you're kind of living in a lot of different PM tools, think of that as a way to maybe come together and pull everything into a more common space. Now, also in this section, we're also talking beyond PPM software, we're also talking PM toolkits. And we're, again, big believers in this, in that your organization should have one tailored to you, and with a set of tools and templates that you can consistently use across all of your projects. And then give training to your PMs on how to use the tools. And some of these tools may be pre-kickoff tools, like how do you charter up a project? What's your onboarding checklist? If you're mobilizing a project, what's your tool for a project plan? And that project plan could be enabled through a Smartsheet, or could be enabled through some other PPM software. We're going to talk about more about RACI in just a second. We already introduced it briefly, but how do you identify the right stakeholders to be involved? As you're trying to actually execute on your project and get the work done, what is your tool for status report? I showed you one of our sample status reports in Smartsheet. We also have status reports, a standard report that's enabled through another tool. Also, you might have a meeting tool for your agenda, such as Grippy that I showed you. And then finally, after the project, you may have lessons learned in other tools. And one of the things at the end here we're going to talk about is Elire is happy to make to folks who are interested, we're happy to expose 3 of these tools and templates to all of you so that you can leverage them for your own organization. And but again, a lot of these tools can be powered through a Smartsheet or some other PPM software, or live off as a standalone tool. But we definitely recommend you have some set of tools. Now, we've talked about RACI a few times, so getting into it a little bit more. So RACI really helps you define ownership of different activities. So if I'm trying to have a series of meetings to redesign GL or AP, then who do I need to have and what role do they play? Are they heads down folks who enter journals or vouchers? Are they the people who oversee those departments? If so, I want them in my meetings, right? Or are they upstream or downstream? And if I make a decision impacting how a journal is done or a voucher is entered, they're going to be impacted. So before I make a decision, I need to consult with them. Or they may be completely separate and not have anything to do with those processes. Then I don't need them in the room. But we talked earlier about trying to only have meetings that make sense and having the right people in the meetings so you don't have to have the same meeting more than once. And a RACI as part of your PM toolkit is a great way to get that done. So when you schedule your meetings, you have the right people in the room. So moving beyond that into different collaboration tools and techniques, collaboration tools don't replace the need for PM tools. We really see PM tools like Smartsheet living in concert and with these collaboration tools. They really work together to give you a more holistic tool set. And one of the tools we use is Microsoft Teams. We're big believers in Microsoft Teams. Some of you might use Tableau. It's very similar. But the reason we like it is it lets you share files across multiple team members. We talked about editing documents, not in a meeting, but having multiple people sign in and edit a document. This is a great way to empower that and make sure you can actually do it. You can also have action items. We don't want to replace the project plan, but the project plan, you may have a project plan, you may not have access to a Smartsheet to send notifications. This is a great way to create action items that might be able to then trigger notifications. And then also be able to collaborate on conversations, whether you're using a chat or whether you're creating a conversation within the actual team space itself. So let's take a quick look at MS Teams. And we use it in lots of different ways at our company. We use it to manage our own projects and create spaces for our own projects. So within MS Teams, you can have lots of different teams that only folks on the team have access to. So it does have security. And within the teaming space, you can create what are known as different channels. So you can have a channel with different posts, where you might have a conversation thread with different links, different decisions being made. This can all be done in a separate chat space, but by doing it here, you're really creating it within only that team space and creating a record of it. You can also have your files. We're big believers in putting files up into the cloud, and this is and if you're on multiple projects, it can sometimes be difficult to remember where's all my files, right? So this is a great way to get all the files organized in one space and then put them in an area that when people open them, they can all collaborate and edit them and view them all at the same time. You can also have action items where, you might create different tasks, that have to be completed and who's assigned to them. And it can trigger off reminders for people on overdue tasks so that things get done. So again, what this is doing is creating a teaming space where you can have action items in parking lots and share your files and share your conversations that works in conjunction with a Smartsheet or other PPM tool where you have your detailed project plan, you have your status reports, you have dashboards and things of that nature. So really those two sets of tools are coming together to help create a hopefully a lot more collaboration for your project team. Now, a lot of collaboration is being done remotely right now. And so some of this communication, some of this tips for improving remote work start with communication, like leveraging an MS Teams or making sure you have good status reports. It's also making sure that there's a lot of adaptability. When people are spread out, it can be difficult when there's a change to get everyone on the same page. So that's a great example of when you may need a meeting to bring everyone together to say, this is what we know, what we don't know, how we're going to get answers, and when we're going to talk to you next. Also, when we meet in person, there's a lot of social engagement that happens, and social engagement leads to better project work. So you can still really encourage that connection remotely. And then just to re-emphasize the point from earlier, when you're in remote work, you need time. We used to need time to run from building to building. Now we need time to run from Zoom call to Zoom call. And so you still need to be able to build that in. So the last item here, and we have about 5 minutes left, so I think we're right on time. We just want to talk to you about some complimentary resources available to all of you and then take some Q&A. So one of them is a project health check, where over a course of just a few hours, complimentary to all the participants on this call, we're happy to sit down with you and talk to you about what's your structure, what's your toolkit, what are your resources? How are you doing on budget, scope, timeline? And then end up with a very specific set of recommendations of what you can do to improve the overall structure, collaboration, teaming that's occurring within your project. So again, that project health check can be done in just a couple hours remotely, and it's a free service to all those who are participating. The other thing is the PM Toolkit we mentioned, which is, we're happy to expose to you some of our templates. We showed you a little bit about a RACI and a GRIPY, and as well as a status report done in Smartsheet. So we're happy to share some of those templates with you and to kind of kick you off and get you down the path in the right direction so that you yourselves can build a more robust toolkit.
Thank you, Richard. And we'll go ahead and launch our poll here for everyone. So, and feel free to select all that apply. Would your organization be interested in advice on Smartsheets or MS Teams, that free PM toolkit and templates, free project health check, or nothing at this time? And we'll give everyone just a couple seconds here to answer before we go into Q&A. And just a reminder too, as everyone is submitting their questions here, please submit any of those Q&A questions either in the chat to panelists at the bottom right or on the Q&A portal. And we're going to go ahead and close that poll out. Thank you everyone for answering. With that, we'll move over to our Q&A portal here. So I did have a couple questions come through in the chat to panelists. First one for you, Richard. You mentioned, quite a few different ideas and tools. Where should we start if we want to take some of these moving forward?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question because we did give a lot of information. I think one place to start is with some of those free templates we're offering, right? And that's a simple reaching out to us, and we'll give you our contact information, and we'll be following up with everyone after this. But starting off with leveraging some of those simple 3 easy to use tools that we're happy to share with all of you is a great way to sort of get you starting to walk down the right path.
Excellent. And then you just talked about it a little bit, but can you give more information on the health check and just how long it takes?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So health checks can really occur depending on the size of the project. It can really be anywhere from maybe 1 hour to maybe about 3 hours, not 3 consecutive hours, but hours, a couple of different sessions. And what we do is we come in with a predefined set of questions to really walk you through the types of tools that you're using, how you're doing on scope and budget and other items. And we're really soliciting a lot of information from you and then putting it through our own tool to then come up with to score your project and then come up with specific recommendations to help improve the scores of those projects. The goal there is definitely to give very practical, specific advice tailored to that particular project.
Excellent. Thank you, Richard. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move on just to our few wrap-up items here. If there are any remaining questions, I am going to stick our email just down in the chat. Feel free to submit any questions there as well. For upcoming Elire events, we are going to be presenting at Quest PeopleSoft Week for all PeopleSoft users out there. That's Quest's free learning week for all PeopleSoft users, or I think it's $49 to attend if you're not a Quest user. We'll be presenting on PTF, specifically testing, data entry, and validation. We are also going to be presenting on maximizing PeopleSoft, tools for accelerating your PeopleSoft transformation. And that's another 30-minute webinar coming up here in July. With that, we would like to thank everyone for your time today. All of our social tags are up here. Again, the recording of today's presentation, as well as all of our past webinars, are going to be available on that Elire Inc. YouTube. Thank you so much, Richard, for your time today. And everyone have a wonderful rest of their day.
Yeah, thanks everyone. We sure do appreciate it.